to come in and get checked. Because if your immune system is not functioning at 100%, that will allow your body not to fight off that infection fast enough. Now, upper cervical doctors are different. We do something a little bit different that other chiropractors don't do. And the big thing here is this upper cervical spine. A cervical spine means the upper neck. So here's the skull, the first bone of the neck, and second bone of the neck, and so on. You have very weak muscles that hold that upper neck in place. You have the ribs here, which really lock the mid-back in place, and you have very strong muscles in the low back to hold that low back in place. But if for any reason at all there's a trauma, a fall, a stress, what will happen is that upper neck will misalign. When that upper neck misaligns, all the information coming down through that spinal cord is interfered with. And this is what can cause a lot of problems throughout the body. And problems like, you can get interference with the heart, interference with the nerves that go into the lungs, the stomach, the digestive system, the menstrual system, the prostate in men, the eyes, the ears, the sinus problems, the ear infections, especially with kids, vision problems, hearing problems. All of these particular problems can happen if there's a misalignment. Specifically, we call that a subluxation that causes a kink in that upper cervical spine, puts pressure on that brainstem area, and does not allow for the proper information to get from the brain to the body. My job simply is to remove that interference, let the body heal itself, and allow those messages to get properly throughout the spine. And a lot of times people say, well, that's too simple. And that's exactly what it is. It's a very simplistic reasoning of why a lot of times the body doesn't function properly. Here's a diagram of the uniqueness of the atlas, which is the upper cervical spine subluxation. Here's a couple pictures of normal alignment. Here's a misalignment, how it shifts out of balance. It causes postural changes throughout the spine. So we can look at the posture, we can look at the shoulders, we can look at the hips. If the hips are on level, it's because that upper neck has become misaligned. So we can look at the entire spine, how problems in the neck can trickle down and cause issues down in the low back and the pelvic area. Now, a lot of times, people ask me, well, what causes the spine to subluxate or misalign? And I always mention it, we all bring it back to the three types of stresses. The spine is like a circuit breaker. So if you have a circuit breaker on your house, the electrical system is all functioning properly, all of a sudden lightning hits your house. As a protective mechanism, your body or your house is going to have a circuit breaker that's going to flip. When that circuit flips, whatever circuit that goes to does not work right. And similar, if it goes into the refrigerator, the food's going to spoil and get all nasty. What a chiropractor does is look at the source of why that circuit has flipped in the first place. And similar to the circuit breaker in your body, there are different stresses that cause the spine to flip. We have chemical stress, we have physical stress, and we have emotional stress. Now, 3 dimensions of stress. Physical stress, this is probably the one that most people think of when they think of traumas. They think of falls, they think of accidents, car accidents, sitting in a chair all day. These are things that commonly can cause the spine to misalign. Also, sleeping incorrectly, sleeping on your stomach rather than sleeping on your back or your side. Another example of stress are biochemical stress. Biochemical stress is what we put into our bodies. And this is one of my favorite pictures. We have a picture of McDonald's here. It's a 24-hour drive-thru, but there's a free gym membership with a salad, which is kind of funny. But some good physical, positive biochemical stresses. Fish oil, probiotics, vitamins, eating healthy foods. All these are proper positive biochemical stresses. And then we also have negative biochemical stresses. Things like preservatives, bad fats, pesticides, herbicides, soda, high fructose corn syrup. All of these are huge, huge toxins throughout the body. And the last one is emotional stress, psychological stress. Now, out of all 3 of those stresses, well, let me discuss the psychological stress. These are some psychological stress can be positive and it also can be negative. Positive physical or emotional stress, loving relationships, doing something good for yourself, love, compassion for other people. Some negative stresses, usually money, work, and finances. Those are usually the big 3 that end up causing a significant amount of emotional tension throughout the body. Now when you have these three stresses, we have chemical, physical, and emotional stress. Which of those stresses do you think would be the greatest damage to the body? It's actually emotional stress. Emotional stress is the #1 cause of a lot of problems throughout the body, and that's one of those things that people don't really think of. But if they're going through a huge amount of stress in the body, one of the first things that happens is the shoulders start to get tight, the neck tension starts to get really, really bad. And that's one of the things that we do notice, is that the stress will literally come back into the spine and will cause that spine to misalign. All of these stresses come into the body, and our body really fights off those stresses. And another stress that a lot of people don't realize is gravity. Gravity is a huge stress that constantly pulls down on us. But our body will fight that stress. And it'll fight the stress tooth and nail. Do whatever it has to do to keep that body alive. So the stresses come into the body. Our body will kind of resist that stress. And our body's ability to adapt to the stress is called GAP. GAP is a concept called General Adaptive Potential. This is a huge concept that if you get anything out of this talk, out of this video, GAP is the most important thing that I can really stress, because GAP is the difference between an individual that is healthy and an individual that's sick. And when it comes to GAP, the size matters. On this particular chart here, we see the Dow Jones little red lines. These red lines indicate stress in the body, stress in our lives. The graph here, the range, represents our body's ability to adapt to that stress. So in this particular example, the range is very, very small. But the person's stress is all over the place. As soon as the stress passes our body's ability to adapt to the stress, this is where our spine subluxates. And when the spine subluxates, your body cannot handle the stress as well as it could. So what ends up happening is the range ends up getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as soon as it gets small enough, that's when you can't adapt to the environment anymore, and that's when you start to have major, major health problems. But as you start to get adjusted, something cool happens. The range actually gets bigger. So the stress that you couldn't handle before, now it's a piece of cake. Every time you come in and we make a correction on your spine, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So all of the stresses that were originally causing some issues before, now your body's like, hey, I can handle it. And this is the best benefit I can offer you as an upper cervical doctor, is I can increase your body's ability to adapt to stress so your body can fight it off and function properly and experience true quality of life. Luckily, we have technology in our office that can measure that gap. We have technology that measures 5 different scans that really isolate the nerve system function. And all of these 5 particular scans, we get a number between 0 and 100. And that number represents how well your body is adapting to stress. By looking at this particular number here, looks like this is at an 85, which is a pretty good score. 100 being perfect, 0 being pretty bad. So on this particular score here, 84 is a very good score, but we can monitor how well your body is adapting to that stress and how you're responding to care by looking at where you are on that, what's called NSFI. It's a neurospinal functional index number. We have technology that can monitor that gap and see